Alright, so let's talk a little bit more in depth about extruding and modifying a 3D object. No matter how you create it, whether it's from a shape or selection, or even a selected layer, or even a text layer we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's going to by default extrude the object to a certain point. Now, what is extruding? Well, it's merely just extending an object on the z-axis. If you remember right, we were talking about the x and y axis when it comes to two dimensions, the y being the vertical axis and then the x being the horizontal axis, and those are the only two dimensions in a 2D application. However, when you create an extruded object in 3D, it needs a direction to go. Well, it's going to go in that z-axis and extend the object at a certain point. Let's have a look at what we're talking about here. I'm actually going to go ahead and use a couple of elliptical shapes here. I'm just drawing them as paths. I'm just going to add one small one here. And I'm holding the shift key down as I draw these, so they'll be perfect circles as well. And I'm just going to hold down the option key and just option drag, hold the shift key down as well to keep it constrained, another shape or a duplicate of that circle shape over this way just a little bit. So let's drag and select both of those shapes. And I'm just going to go in here to the 3D panel and choose Work Path for the source. 3D extrusion is my only choice, and we'll go ahead and click Create. Now, notice what happened is, converted it to 3D, my objects are sitting on the ground plane that we discussed about earlier, and if I grab my camera, I've got the current view selected here in the 3D panel, I can go up here and choose my Object Rotate tool here in the options bar and just click and rotate this around and see that that has created an extrusion based on that selection. Now, let's just actually kind of zoom out here. So notice I'm using these different tools here. I have the object tool I can rotate around, and I'm moving the camera view, notice, because the ground plane is moving with me. I can use this slide tool to come back and forth in space. I can actually move it up and down with this. So every tool is going to give you a different direction in which to move your object or your angle of view, depending on whether you're modifying the object itself or the camera view. So in the 3D panel, I'm going to select this background object, which is these two shapes right here. And you'll notice that we have a slider for the extrusion depth. Well, if I take that and push it to the right more, you'll notice that the extrusion gets deeper and deeper and deeper on my object. And then let's just kind of zoom out here so we can really see what's happening here. I'm just going to zoom it out, nudge it down here. So again, I'll select that object and go all the way out and extend it to its furthest point. And that's how far the extrusion goes. Now I can go further, of course, if I go over here and highlight the scale along z-axis and extend this even further beyond what the number has given me. So that's a little trick. If you're trying to extrude an object and you want to go further than what these numbers allow you to do, you can just stretch it out. And I know it is stretching. Just know that it is stretching this object. So if you add a texture, it will stretch the texture as well. So just be aware of that. But with the extrusion, notice if I take it back down and it gets to the middle where it's almost nothing, it's actually going to come in the other direction. So you can extrude either front ways or back ways on the 3D object, depending on what effect you're going for with your 3D object. I'm just going to move this around here. So again, I'm selecting the background. I can bring it forward by going in the negative for the extrusion depth or going into the positive, and that will extrude it backwards in space, as you see right there. And I can also edit the source here. If I click on this little Edit Source button, I can actually go in here and do something like knock out a hole in one of these shapes. If I were to go and grab that same ellipse shape tool, and let's go to Subtract from Shape, and just draw a small circle inside each one of these, basically making them like a little pipe or tube. And they're both knocking out. Let's make sure they're knocking out the shape here. Let's do Subtract from Shape, just to be sure. And when I close this and save the changes, you can see it knocks a hole through that object. Let's go ahead and select our layer. So there you can see I've got holes bored right through my object. So I can even modify these shapes after I've created them by going in and adding more paths and having more shapes modified to change the shape. Now, of course, we're talking about the extrusion. Is it going along one axis here? It's either going frontwards or backwards. If I go over here, again in the 3D panel, I'm going to select the object that contains this, or the line item that contains this background object. And over here, I'm going to go into these properties panels, these tabs up front. If I click on the second one, which is the Deform tab, I can do things like twisting the object. If I move the twist slider, you can see that this now it starts to twist around itself and giving me a kind of a cool spiral effect on that. I can have it tapering down or up as it gets closer. And notice the interesting result this gives me with that object. And of course, the great thing is that these effects are live, so I can actually extend the extrusion. If I want to make it bigger, I can go into that deform section and twist it a little bit more to get me kind of a cool symbol effect in there. I can also go down here to the horizontal and vertical angles, move these back and forth, and actually bend my object on that particular axis. And so you could bend it or shear it, which is basically turning it at an angle, a really sharp angle, or I can go ahead and do a bend, and it will just bend it along the axis as well. Now, you can also do this on this widget. Remember this widget I was talking about? This allows you to do it more freehand, so I can actually twist this around in 3D space depending on which area I hover over. I can extend the extrusion or decrease it. I can change the twisting of it with this widget here. Notice if I move that around, I can just take the twisting down, 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 and then go over here and just modify this positioning here. I can increase the size, all using that widget. So all the properties, again, of this widget here are the same properties over here in the deform section of the properties panel. They're just, the difference is just one is on screen and one is in the panel. Now, if you want to get more precise measurements or settings, then you would certainly want to use the sliders or even input the numbers in here in these specific settings to get a very specific setting. But otherwise, you can go in here and just manually move these around and play around with the angles until you get what you're looking for. So you're not just stuck with the straight extrusion of an object, but you could take it further than that and do twisting and tapering and do all these different things to play around with different effects. And this works on any layer that you've converted to 3D. Again, whether it's from a path, a text layer, a selected a layer, and again, don't forget that you have that feature where you can go in there and edit the source. This was something that was not available in CS5, was once you created a 3D object, you could not go back and change it. To update the 3D object, you would have had to go back to the beginning and redo that all over again. So that's a huge time saver to be able to do this and not just be able to modify the extrusion, but be able to go back and modify the original shape at any time is a huge benefit as well. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the crown jewel, I think, of all the 3D features inside Photoshop, and that is being able to create 3D text. But not just 3D text, editable 3D text. Now, as I mentioned in CS5, when you would create 3D text, it would rasterize the text, thus making it uneditable no matter how far you went with it. Now we have the ability to edit the text, even after we've applied a number of different surface properties and complex features to it, still have that editable text. So let's take a look at that in the next lesson.